about biblical womanhood. It's something that I've been kind of wrestling with all week, and actually more than that. It's kind of the part two from our sermon 2 weeks ago. Last week we had guest speakers where we talked about what it means to restore manhood, and today we're talking about womanhood. And it's not coming from any particular one part of Ruth, but kind of a general survey over, Ruth chapters 1 and 2, and also in parallel to Ephesians chapter 4, 21 to 24. So please keep that in mind. And, I've done a lot of meditation over the week, and I did a lot of reading and listening and on this topic of biblical womanhood. I read through multiple books and read through different parts of Scripture, listened to a lot of different sermons and seminars, and even read through Ruth a few more times, just praying for wisdom and insight. And, it came to me, it's so much easier for me to come up here to talk about what biblical manhood is because I'm one of them. I struggle with the same struggles. I kind of know the heart motives and the different sins that we have, and I'm called to live up to the same calling, so it's easier for me to talk about that. But for women, it's a little bit different. I'm not talking out of experience. I'm only talking from what I know, the words of God telling me to talk about. But then again, maybe God has been training me in so many different ways in my own life. I grew up with so many women in the home. My father passed away when I was younger. So for most of my life, I was the only guy in the house. My mom was my mom and my dad. I had an aunt that came to live with us all for extended periods of time. She was like my second mom. I have two sisters, and now I have my mother-in-law who's close by. So I got like three moms at home. My whole life, I prayed for another man in the house. So I'm so thankful for my brother-in-laws. They do a lot of the heavy lifting for our family now. I always secretly wanted sons, but now I have two daughters. So I think this is going to be the theme of my life for the rest of my life. And the ironic thing is, because even at church, I became the leader of our women's discipleship group, our first launch. And it was a bit awkward for me at first, but by the end, I think I became a part of them, right? Like you guys, they began to share far more than I wanted to know, but it was a great experience. But all jokes aside, I know from my heart of hearts, there are things that no one can really understand until you're living it day in and day out. I'll never understand womanhood, motherhood, or sisterhood. So I pray that God may cover me with humility as I preach today. And I know it's a sensitive topic, especially in our day and age. So I wrestled with that a lot, asking God to give me sensitivity, yet in another sense that God may grant me confidence and boldness, because it's not about any person's wisdom or experience, but it's the wisdom shown in God's word. And it's this prophetic vision that I'm called to be a vessel to preach through. So please just keep that in mind and pray for me. Before we get started, let me just open us up with a word of prayer. Dear God, I just pray that you may open up our ears and our hearts to receive your words. May it plant seeds deep within our souls, O Lord, and may it bear fruit that is pleasing to you. And I just pray, O Lord, that every word of my mouth and all the meditations of all of our hearts may be holy and pleasing to you. And I pray that your word may be preached, your gospel may be proclaimed, and your spirit may work in our hearts. Just thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So 2 weeks ago, I first touched on this idea called biblical complementarianism. It's a doctrine of the church that often gets a bad reputation, not because of what it's actually teaching, but because of the history of abuse using it. A lot of people have come to think that it means that one sex is better than the other, therefore one must be considered lower than the other. But this is not true. Biblical complementarianism says that all people, all genders, all sexes are equal in value, in dignity, and worth. They're equal in their standing before God, equally loved, equally valuable, equally a part of God's mission, equally made in his image. No one has a higher standing before God, yet they are fundamentally different in how they are made. They have a different calling in the home and also in the church. And these differences are not about being superior or inferior, but they're made to complement each other with their strength. And it's this diversity that makes gender beautiful. Gender is not a mere label or a social construct, but it comes with a unique calling by how God designed us. And keep in mind that these callings were given to each gender so that we may be able to serve one another in the best way possible. To serve each other in the way that the other yearns for it, serve in the way that the family yearns for it, And God's calling for both men and women is made for the sake of serving each other and also the broader community in the world. And 2 weeks ago, I kind of came down on men, telling them that they are called by God to lead, to protect, and to provide. And it's a prophetic vision from God. And it's not called to be done for the sake of ego, for the sake of male chauvinism, not for the sake of pride, but to be done in love. I mean, Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And this call to leadership is not a worldly leadership where we have a powerful person on top to be served, but it's a leadership that is called to display servant leadership, one who takes responsibility, one who is willing to take lower places for the benefit of those he leads, the one who protects and provides for those he leads, the one who is willing to put his life on the line, the leadership that is willing to wash the feet of the ones he loves. It's a leadership that serves. It's a Christ-like leadership. And we saw that in Boaz. And if you haven't listened to that sermon, please go back to it. It's called Redeeming Manhood. But today we're going to get a glimpse of what the calling of biblical womanhood is and how women are called to serve in the relationship to a man, reflecting their unique way of being made in the image of God for their families. And the backbone of this calling goes all the way back to the story of creation, where God shows his intention of why he creates women, and later that is clarified in Ephesians chapter 5, and how this calling works within the family. And I actually touched on a little bit of it, I think, last year. And if you're single in this room, please don't think that this is, I don't need to hear it. No, don't tune out. Many of these attributes of the strength of women are applicable in so many different contexts. And it also gives you some guidance for future relationships. But what are the points that we're going to go over today? And I pray that you might be able to listen to them with open hearts and actually listen to the definitions of them. But 3 points I'm going to go over today is 1, a calling to submit, 2, a calling to respect, and 3, a calling to first be redeemed. Let me start with submit. First and foremost, there's a misconception that only women are called to submit. It's not true. In fact, before any of these commands are given, there's a calling for all to submit. Let me read you guys Ephesians chapter 4, verse 21, going on to 24. But it says this, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. This is first said to everyone. Men are also called to submit their lives, to give it up. Then Paul goes on to say this, wives, submit to your own husbands, as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. His body is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Please don't stone me. Now, first and foremost, I want to say that this is not saying all women are called to submit to all men. The scripture doesn't say that, no way. But it's saying submit to your own husbands, your own man. And it's not saying that you cannot lead in any context. Of course not. Even in this room right here, there are a lot of women in leadership that do awesome and fabulous jobs. But just as a husband is called to serve their woman by taking responsibility for them, willing to die for them, willing to live for her, to protect and provide, and to love her above all else, this calling is in turn, it's a calling for women to serve him back by submitting. Now, what does the word submit? I think I got to clarify that. It means to willingly give your husbands the authority and responsibility to lead. It means to build them up to that calling. Now, submitting is not for the weaker person. It really isn't. You know, just yesterday at our small group, a member of our church, a strong woman of God, she, you know, and I was talking about like, oh, I'm a little like nervous about preaching. And she looked at me and she was like, no, I don't submit to my husband out of weakness. I do it out of strength. I got the shivers down my spine. I was like, all right, I got this, you know. But submitting really is done out of strength for the sake of the one you love. You don't do it out of weakness because you have no choice, but you do it willingly out of the strength and love that you have. Now check this out. When Adam first created Eve, Genesis chapter 2, verse 17, God said this, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him. Now, you know, I mentioned this in a past sermon, but this is, you got to listen to what it's actually saying. It's kind of a gut shot to men. You have to imagine everything he created in creation up to that point. He looked at the lights, he looked at the sky and said it was beautiful. He looked at the water, said it was beautiful. Looked at the plants, looked at the animals, said it was beautiful, and it was good. He said everything was good. But he looks at the man, all alone, maybe naked. He scrunched up his face and it's like, yo, this is not good. What's going on? It's like you cook the meal, but something's missing, and you're like, what is it? What's missing? And he's like, it's not good. I can't eat this. It needs something. Now, there's a joke that pastors often say that if God created woman first, then he might have not created man. It's like, because he would have said it was good. I mean, it's probably true. If the world was all men, we'd probably kill each other off, and then, we have no means of reproduction, and that'd be it. But look at this. But God creates woman because they were utterly needed for the world, needed for men. Now, look at the word helper. It kind of sounds like, at first when you hear this, it kind of sounds like a kid holding the ladder for his dad or something like that. The manly man that holds the tools. But the word helper does not have any nuances or no nuances of weakness in this. In fact, the word helper, the Hebrew word azer, is the same word used to describe God himself. In Exodus chapter 18-4, it says that Moses named one of his sons Eliezer, which literally means my God is my helper. Helper is referring to someone who is a life giver. And it's in conjunction with even Eve's name. Eve, the first woman, her name means to give life. Eve. That name is a part of her calling as a helper. She's a life giver. It's a title of tremendous strength and ability. When the word submit is used to describe the calling of a helper, it's called to be done in reference to a woman being the stronger helper for the family and the world, a life giver. So true. I mean, you guys always hear that phrase, right? Behind every great man, there's a great woman, and behind every stable family is a strong mother. It's so true. So true. But along with that calling to help out of strength and the calling to submit, it means to follow your husband's lead. And I know it sounds like, man, like I'm stabbing women, but just hear me out. It means following their lead, and not only following their lead, it's helping them to lead, is being a life giver for it. This doesn't mean that you follow his lead blindly. If he's going against the Lord and he is in sin, you're not called to submit under that sin. If he's abusive, you're not called to submit under that. In fact, women are called to be prophetic voices to a man to help them when they fall and to call some stuff out, because you're first and foremost called to submit to God. And the submission also requires a man to be submitted to God, because that's only where his authority comes from. Now, it's not hard to see how Ruth displays this in her life. And not even talking about her submission to Boaz, because that's not happening yet. But look at her life of submission to Naomi, her mother-in-law. See, what we don't realize here is Ruth is not just submitting and following Naomi because Naomi is a great woman, but her submission to Naomi is rooted in her submission to her husband. She is connected to her mother-in-law through her husband. I mean, tell me now, you're not connected to your mother-in-law or your in-laws because you love them and you're like, oh, great respect for them. No, you look to your husband or you look to your wife, and that's the only reason. Same thing in this case. Let me tell you, but the submission that you give, and I'm going to say this out of revealing guys' insecurities, right, is the greatest gift you can give to a man. I mean, as a man, the moments in life where I feel most deformed, most empowered, the most where I want to run out and give my life for my family, the most where I want to put my life on the line and protect, is when this very act of submission is given to me as a gift. I'm not entitled to it, but given as a gift. There's a reason why. And those of you guys that grew up in the 90s, I don't know if you guys remember, the Locks had that song. They're like, yo, I need a ride or die chick. And they go off with it, and they're like really like talking about the person to ride or die, And then later on, Jay-Z comes out with a song called Bonnie and Clyde, where he's like, oh, a girl that runs with me to the end, There's a reason why these rap songs are coming out of the soul of men, because it's a need in our hearts. And back in the day, I mean, just a few weeks ago, I thought that Ruth's line verses, chapter 1, 16-17 were lines that like Shakespearean thing that guys would say. But no, I think it's a line that moves the heart of men. Let me read this to you guys. But Ruth said this, and he says this to her mother-in-law, but I'm imagining her saying this, looking to her husband. She says this, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. Tell me now, a woman that says this, is just roll over like, I'm done, That's it. And I get it, submission is a horrible thing when first and foremost, a man is not submitted to God and is not living up to his calling to love, to lead, to protect, and to provide. And I get why women have a distaste for this and almost an allergic reaction to it. But know that your submission is not done out of weakness. It's not. It's not because you have no choice, but it's done out of strength. And it's for the sake of the man you love and the man that God has brought into your life, or the man who he will bring into your life, so that you can be a life giver. And God calls you to it not because he deserves it, but because he calls you to it. But it leads to the second point. The second point follows along the same thing. A part of the calling to submit is also a calling to respect. Ephesians chapter 5:33 states this. However, let each of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Now check this out. God gives these callings for a reason, because it fights against the very weak points and temptations for each gender. See, just as a man is tempted to use his power and strength and to oppress and to push down others, or even maybe to neglect his family just to be able to, or take on a passive role so he can do his own thing, and escaping, God calls him to love, to lead, and to protect, and to provide. It's a calling that a man needs to actually be able to live it out. But in the same way, a woman also has a temptation. It's to be using her words and her emotions to shame her husband or to manipulate him to doing what she wants. Therefore, God brings this calling to respect. See, women, you guys all know this. You guys hold tremendous power. Tremendous power. You can break down a man or build him up. And you can. Women, you guys might not, maybe you guys do, or maybe you don't. I don't know. Husbands are extremely affected by the respect of their wives or the lack of it. Men are either enabled and strengthened by the respect of their wives, or they're broken down by it. And I know this firsthand. Let me tell you, as a church leader and a father, I would not be able to be in the spot of a spiritual leader or a pastor without the support and respect of my wife, because I have way too many insecurities, and it would come out in my leadership. It would. My insecurities would either make me a very passive man where I don't want to take any roles in any type of leadership, or would drive me to be an egotistic jerk. Because I'd be fishing for respect somewhere else because I'm not receiving it at my most sensitive parts. But this is a part of being a life giver, a strong helper. A life-giving wife is one who respects her husband, and a life-taking one is one that doesn't. And you have to realize that this calling to respect, I've done a lot of reading on this, and, other women have also said this to be true. It's not just for the sake of men. It's also for the sake of women. A woman's willingness to respect will also affect her own heart to love. In the book, Each for the Other, I want to encourage you guys to read it. It's been one of the textbooks for our marriage counseling. But it's written by Brian and Kathy Chappell. But Kathy writes this. This is the wife. She writes, when a woman supports and affirms her spouse, her love for him deepens. The regard she gives not only expresses her love, but builds it. And when she withholds regard, love diminishes. For this reason, the Bible instructs wives to search for the affection that strengthens marriage, not in the deserving of her husband, not in the deserving of her husband, but in the desires of her heart. The instruction resonates with the deeper truth that a wife longs to respect her husband because she knows her capacity to love deepens on that regard. Isn't it true that deep inside of all hearts of women, there's this wanting to give that respect. There's that desire. So how can we actually live this out? Just a couple of things, and this is not just for women, this is also for men. Men are also called to the same standards of respect, but there is a special power that a woman has when doing these things. One, we can respect by having gratitude rather than entitlement. Having gratitude rather than entitlement. Just look at Ruth's attitude on the field when meeting with Boaz. Let me read this to you guys. Ruth chapter 2:13. She said this. And she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. Now notice the tone, As you guys know, Boaz has given her a lot of generosity, has given her a lot of, food and all this. But notice, there's not a tone at all of entitlement. Granted, if you guys know the law back then, it was required for people who owned fields to actually give the leftovers to the people that came onto their field. She could have gone and said, hey, where's my corner of the field? Where's the gleaning? It's mine. Tell your men to leave it because it's due to me. But from beginning to end, there's a tone of humility and gratitude for everything. She says, why are you kind to me? I don't deserve this. There's a tone of gratitude for being allowed to glean, a tone of gratitude for not being treated as a foreigner. There's an acknowledgement that she's not getting what she's getting something that she doesn't deserve. Let me tell you guys, gratitude, right? It's not just saying thank you, but it's the very mindset that really believes that you're getting something you don't deserve. Real gratitude is when you acknowledge that. See, it reflects how we are all called to respond to the gospel. Jesus is called our groom for a reason, and we are to receive the gift of salvation from him with gratitude. A Christian doesn't come before God and say, yo, God, I paid my dues. I did it all. I worked my salvation. Where is it? The scripture actually goes on to say it is a gift from God so that no one may boast, and that's the heart of gratitude. And a way to do it is simply to recognize all the ways that your man is blessing you. And it really does start from where you place your mind. It's amazing how things change depending on how your thinking is. More than anything else, respect is the attitude and the mindset. It's not a particular action per se, but it's a mindset where you place your heart and your mind. And Philippians 4:8-9 says this, keep your mind on honorable things, things to be thankful for. And when you choose to think about, what you choose to think about when it comes to your man will impact the very lenses that you have and how you see him. If you focus on all the ways he doesn't add up, let me tell you guys, if you focus on all the ways he doesn't provide, protect, or lead, you will only see what you don't have, and you will continue to be frustrated and irritated and always will compare him to another person. But if you choose to stare at the blessings you have through him, you're going to see all the little ways that he's blessing you through them. Respect is shown through this heart that looks for things to be thankful for. And in turn, that respect through gratitude builds him to be who he's called to be. One of the fastest ways, let me tell you guys, one of the fastest ways to take away a calling from a guy is to have this idea of entitlement. If you lose the heart of gratitude, trust me on this, entitlement does not move the heart. It doesn't build up the family. Demanding what you think you deserve does not move a person to willingly change. Don't get me wrong, demanding things does make people change. But you know what entitlement breeds? Entitlement. And once he's pushed all that hard and done his best, he's going to turn around and demand the same things from you. How many of the conversations goes like this, right? You know what I do for this family? And you can't even do that. A respectful heart is a heart of gratitude. But the second thing is encouragement rather than destructive criticism. And of course, a man is called to do this for a woman. Men are called to be cheerleaders for their spouses, but you might not realize how much more of an impact this is for a man. Women have the ability to push a guy to the next level just by their presence. Just by their presence. Let me tell you a story. In LA, I was serving at a Korean immigrant church, and my wife at that point was new to the staff, and she was serving as a children's pastor. And at one particular staff meeting, the senior pastor looks over at me and says, hey, Paul, you should preach for our New Year's revival in Korean. And I was like, in Korean? I was born in America, dude. I only speak English. Very vocal. I was like mixing Spanish and little Korean. No way. But at that moment, I was saying this in my head, but at that moment, I looked over to Young, my wife that I didn't know, we didn't have a relationship yet, but she was kind of looking at me when that question was asked, and I looked at myself, I was like, yo, don't be a punk. And I looked over to the senior pastor, I was like, yo, I got that. I got it. And I kid you not, like my wife later when we had a relationship, she was like, you look so brave. And I was like, oh, you made me brave. But there's so many key moments of my life where my wife's support and her encouragement meant everything to me. For this church plant, she was one of my greatest supports, telling me not only that I can do this, but more importantly, that she'll ride with me even when I fail. And I kid you not, in my head, I said, I was like, all right, then I'll do my best, because even if it all fails, at least I got them, At least I got my family. And, even now, like, she's working to make things, make ends meet. This year I actually got my doctorate, and I graduated, but 2 years ago, I was having a conversation with my wife, and I was like, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't see the point. There's no way I'm going to write this paper while doing this church. And she kind of gave me this, like, jab, like this rebuke/encouragement. I don't even know what it was. She was like, are you going to give up? Like, are you not going to finish what you started? And I was like, ooh. And then she followed up by saying, you might not see what God can do through it now, but if God gave you the ability, why not do it? That little bit got me moving. It really did. I mean, women in this room, you don't know how much of an impact you are to a man by your mere presence. And if you add encouragement to that, people can fly. Let me ask you, are you a life giver with your words, or are you a life taker? That goes to our last point. How is this all possible? I added in the redeemed part because as we're called to submit and to respect, this can only be done by first being redeemed. Redeemed in who you are in God first, to know your worth in Christ first, to know that you are loved by Christ first. Because you know why? Submission and respect is very hard to do. Very hard to do. You know why? Because you're always going to look over to your man and be like, shh, respect? Submission? Oh, heck no. Shh. I know my wife does that all the time, to lean over to be like, eh. Because our hearts will always look for what is worthy of respect and worthy of submission before giving it. And you know what? You know and I know that no man can live up to those standards. And most of you probably have already found out that men are very stubborn and they change so slowly, and it might even take a lifetime for them to be someone you can actually respect. So respect is not really given because they deserve it, but it's given as a gift. So you need to first and foremost have your inner needs supplied by Christ. It is being filled and satisfied from outside of the man, but be filled with God. See, the gospel enables us to give things when they are not deserved. Just as a man is called to love his wife, to protect her and provide for her, regardless of whether or not she deserves it, that's a calling of a man. A wife is also called to respect, regardless if their husbands deserve it. Guys, marriage is so hard. You need a greater supply for it. You really do. And you know what's so interesting about the book of Ruth? Ruth's faithfulness and loyalty, her submissive heart, and her respect is all acknowledged to be there because she is under somebody else's wings. Remember the sermon a few weeks ago called Under His Wings? We talked about Ruth's faithfulness in the little things that was made possible because of whose wings she is under. See, Ruth had a greater security that enabled her to give herself. See, the strength to be able to be a life giver can only be done if you have that protection, that providence all in God first. And only when you have that God-given security will your heart be able to do this, or else the calling of a woman will either be done out of fear, not out of strength. It'll be done out of weakness, or it will be avoided at all costs, thinking that avoiding it is real strength. You can't do this if you believe that your worth comes from the outside of what God gives you. But you got to first know that you are first and foremost loved and respected in the eyes of God. Know that God loved you first. Know that your worth is not determined by anything external. It's not by your looks. It's not by your ability to produce children. It's not even produced by the man that you have by your side. I think there's a reason why God strips it all away from Ruth and Naomi to show what their real security and strength, where it comes from, whose wings they are under first. Know that you are first and foremost loved, led, protected, and provided by your groom, Jesus Christ, first and foremost. And that he will never let you go, that you have a permanent house in heaven that is far better than any mansion on earth, and his love doesn't fail. And according to John 10:28, no one will be able to snatch you out of his hand. And guys, when you are grounded in that, submission flows. And let me tell you, submission is the heart of Christ. And it's his very reflection. And this is one of the ways that you guys are made in his image. You know, this week I've been reminded of what my old youth pastor once said in a Mother's Day sermon, and my mom reminded me of it. She was like, you know, one of the most memorable sermons by your old youth pastor was this one, where he said, not all of us are mothers, but we all have a mother. And isn't it true that mothers reflect Jesus Christ in such a real way? I mean, talk about the idea of a life giver through the act of submission. A wife through her very body is a giver of life. The very act of submitting her body so that life can be formed. You know, a woman give up so much for a life to be born. They literally give up what their bodies were before. I've known some of you guys before and after kids. I know that to be true. I'm going to get myself in trouble. Erase that. Your body is ripped apart. Your blood is shed. Children are beautiful. Kids are a blessing. But none of that is possible without someone to willingly submit their body and shed their blood, which is the ultimate submission for life to happen. And not to mention the submission that comes through life. My gosh, my mom is still cutting up fruit for me. I say for me, not for you. Yet it's so amazing to me that so many mothers in this room are willing to do it over and over again. Over and over again. But that's the strength of a woman, where they can be willing to submit their lives for the sake of the relationships they're in. And that is not weakness, that is strength. And this is a strength that God will use you to bless your husbands and your family, to bless your communities. This is something special. It's not innate in everyone. And it's the way that you reflect the image of Christ. You know, a woman is called to be a life giver, where your life gives life to others. It gives life to men. And you know what? Let me tell you, it also gives life to future men. You know, we talked a lot about biblical manhood 2 weeks ago, and I came up and said, yo, Boaz was this guy. He loved, led, and protected and provided. But you know, over this week, I was reading Matthew chapter 1 for my quiet time, and I don't know how I missed this before, but I was reading the genealogy of Boaz, and it goes on to this. The mother of Boaz was actually Rahab. And if you guys don't know who Rahab was, she was the first woman to be brought into the family of God from the outside. She was a prostitute, one of the lowest person in her society. She was looked down upon, but she was brought into that family. And you know, you begin to wonder, you know, why was Boaz so respectful and generous to immigrants, to Ruth, to the Moabite? Why did he provide so much for this person that was marginalized, an immigrant woman, widowed, barren, the lowest of her society? And I have no doubt in my mind that it was the influence of his mother. And I was looking at this man like, man, you guys are life givers in so many ways. He didn't become a man of God on his own. There was a life-giving helper behind the scenes. You know, I really pray. You know, sometimes I think our society likes to downplay these special roles, you know. I pray that women in this room may be able to live out their calling as life givers and see that as the greatest strength that you have. You know, and pray that you can live out that calling, and may you continually look to the Lord over and over again for strength to do it. And I also encourage you guys, men in this room, you know, just as we talked about before, may you live out your callings to lead, to protect, to provide, and to love your wives above anything else, looking to Christ. And may we respect our husbands looking to Christ. Let's pray.